The Texas sun burned high that morning, its light spilling over cracked driveways, mailboxes leaning on their rusted bolts, and the manicured hedges of Crestwood Oaks, a suburban neighborhood just north of Houston. It was the kind of place where people paid extra for quiet. The kind of quiet broken only by the rumble of pickup trucks, kids chasing footballs, or the occasional bark of an overfed Labrador. But on this particular morning something colder seeped into the air, an unease that neighbors would later describe as a pressure, the feeling of being watched by something just beyond the hedges. Hold, please, subscribe to True Crime Uncovered. By the time cameras rolled, the block was already shifting from calm to chaos. Phones captured everything. A homeowners association president standing tall in a neatly pressed polo shirt, flanked by two strangers in tactical-looking black jackets. Their boots scuffed Darius Cole's driveway as if they belonged there. Their claim was simple. They were there to enforce community violations. But nothing about this scene felt like a homeowner dispute. This felt like an arrest. And the man they had chosen as their target? He wasn't just another homeowner. He was someone they never should have tested. His name was Darius Cole, 42 years old, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with short-cropped hair flecked with gray, and the calm, measured gaze of someone who had seen violence before. To his neighbors, he was polite, private, the man who waved on garbage days and shoveled snow when the rare Texas frost blanketed the ground. But what no one on that block knew, not even his closest neighbors, was that Darius wasn't just a resident of Crestwood Oaks. He was one of the most feared FBI agents in the Southern Division, a man who had spent nearly 2 decades dismantling cartels, undercover militias, and domestic terror cells. That morning, however, he stood on his own property, staring down 3 men who thought they could control him. The first, Leonard Briggs, 54, the HOA president, carried himself like a sheriff in a one-stoplight town. He was overweight but broad, his neatly trimmed white mustache trying to lend him dignity. He loved control, the kind of man who lived for bylaws, fines, and barking at teenagers for skateboarding. But Leonard wanted more than neighborhood authority. He craved power. And the men beside him? They were his attempt at creating it. The so-called community enforcers wore black tactical jackets with no badges, only patches reading, security unit. They weren't licensed. They weren't cops. They weren't even legally employed. They were 2 unemployed cousins Leonard had convinced to help keep order in exchange for beer, cash, and the illusion of power. Their names were Kyle Mercer, 29, wiry and jittery with close-cropped blonde hair and an uneven beard, and Sean Mercer, 31, broader, darker-haired, with a heavy gut and a permanent scowl. When they walked up Darius's driveway, Leonard raised his hand like he was leading an official raid. "Mr. Cole," Leonard barked, "you are in violation of multiple community codes. We are authorized to detain you until this matter is resolved." Darius didn't move. His eyes flicked once to the neighbors already stepping out with their phones raised. His voice, low and steady, cut through the absurdity. "You have 10 seconds, he said, to leave my property." The silence that followed was electric. Kyle shifted uneasily, muttering something to Sean, but Leonard stood his ground, puffing his chest. "You think you can threaten us? I am this neighborhood," Leonard shouted. "You don't run things here, we do." It was at that exact moment that the lie unraveled. Because the man Leonard was shouting at didn't just know the law. He was the law. Darius stepped forward. Calm, deliberate. "You're impersonating officers," he said, his voice carrying across the street. "That's a federal crime." The word federal hit like a spark in dry grass. Neighbors gasped. Kyle lowered his head. Sean muttered, "Man, let's just go." But Leonard, blinded by ego, only doubled down. "Don't you lecture me about law," Leonard snapped. "This is our jurisdiction." And that's when Darius pulled it. Not a weapon, not a threat, just a leather wallet, flipped open with precision. The badge glinted in the Texas sun. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The block went silent. Cameras zoomed in. Leonard froze, his face draining of color. The Mercers stepped back like kids caught stealing candy. And Darius, without raising his voice, delivered the line that would go viral within hours. "You came to arrest me?" he said. "Gentlemen, you just arrested yourselves." The aftermath was chaos. Neighbors screaming, phones recording, Leonard sputtering excuses. But within minutes, real police sirens cut through the air. Houston PD units rolled up, officers storming out with confusion etched on their faces as they tried to separate what looked like a neighborhood dispute from what was, in reality, a federal-level crime unfolding live. Neighbors shouted their accounts. They came dressed like cops. They said they were taking him in. "We saw everything." Officers lined up Leonard, Kyle, and Sean against the hood of a squad car while Darius stood calmly, arms folded, his badge still visible. The irony was brutal. Leonard Briggs, so used to being the man in charge, was shoved into the back of a cruiser in handcuffs, his shouts muffled by the slam of the door. But that wasn't the end. What followed was a media storm. Within hours, the footage hit social platforms. Millions of views before evening. The headline twisted like a knife. HOA president and fake cops try to arrest black homeowner. Turns out he's an FBI agent. The Department of Justice took over the case. Impersonation of law enforcement. Conspiracy. Attempted unlawful detention. Charges stacked high. And for Leonard Briggs, it was the beginning of a downfall he never saw coming. In interviews, neighbors described the fear. A mother said she kept her kids inside when Leonard's patrols passed. A retired veteran admitted he almost intervened but hesitated. One man, holding back tears, told reporters, "I thought it was going to turn into another headline. Another black man taken down by people who thought they had power." Darius himself stayed silent publicly. But in private, FBI records later revealed, he told investigators he had seen this kind of behavior before. Small men chasing big power, using fear as their weapon. "It starts with a vest and fake authority," he warned. "But it can end with a gun." Months later, the federal courthouse in downtown Houston brimmed with anticipation. Reporters filled the benches. Locals packed the gallery. The case of United States versus Briggs et al. Had become a spectacle. Not just about one neighborhood, but about power, race, and authority in America. Leonard sat at the defense table in a navy suit too tight for his frame, his mustache trimmed to a pencil line. Kyle and Sean slumped beside him, their lawyer whispering frantically. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Karen Lynn, presented the opening argument with fire. "These men sought to strip a citizen of his rights under the guise of authority," she thundered. "They weaponized fear. But the law cannot be faked. The law stands real, and it will hold them accountable." The star witness was, of course, Darius Cole. Taking the stand in his crisp dark suit, Darius's voice carried the weight of his years in the bureau. "They told me they were authorized to detain me," he said. "They weren't. They tried to abuse power they didn't have. I've seen cartels do it. I've seen militias do it. But I never expected to see it in my own neighborhood." Cross-examination was tense. Leonard's defense tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, community dispute taken too far. But Karen Lynn dismantled it with precision. "Mr. Briggs," she asked during cross, "can you explain why your community patrol wore tactical jackets with patches designed to mimic law enforcement?" Leonard stammered. "And can you explain why your so-called detainment authority included telling Mr. Cole he had no right to leave his driveway?" The defense faltered. Jurors leaned forward. And in the gallery, neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads, others wiping tears. The most damning moment came when footage was played on a projector. Darius flipping his badge, Leonard's face draining of color, and the line that shook the courtroom as much as it had the internet. "You came to arrest me? Gentlemen, you just arrested yourselves." The verdict was swift. Guilty on all counts. Leonard Briggs was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy and impersonation of law enforcement. Kyle and Sean Mercer received 7 and 8 years respectively. When the gavel fell, gasps filled the courtroom. Some cheered. Others cried. Leonard's wife collapsed into sobs. But through it all, Darius sat steady, his face unreadable, his gaze fixed forward. Crestwood Oaks returned to its quiet rhythm, but it was never truly the same. Neighbors looked at each other differently. Some ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner, others proud they'd recorded the truth. The HOA board dissolved, replaced by a community council with checks, balances, and, most importantly, humility. And as for Darius, he remained in the neighborhood, still mowing his lawn, still waving on garbage days. But now everyone knew who he was, and more importantly, what he stood for. The story of that day echoed far beyond Houston. It became a parable about fake authority, racial bias, and the quiet strength of standing firm against intimidation. Because here's the lesson. Power isn't in a badge you buy online or a title you give yourself. Power is in truth. Power is in restraint. Power is knowing that justice doesn't need to shout to be heard. And when fake power collides with the real thing, the truth will always win. So, the next time someone waves control like a weapon, remember the driveway in Crestwood Oaks and the man who refused to bow. Because justice, real justice, wears no disguise. If you liked this story, please take a moment to subscribe to True Crime Uncovered to get more intriguing stories. Thank you.